Andrew Levy's on the line, former senior British diplomat who's worked in Moscow. Andrew, hello.
Good afternoon.
It seems very much as though Donald Trump has put Crimea onto the negotiating table here, possibly as well territories in eastern Ukraine. Are they for him to put on the table, Andrew?
No, but he's in a very powerful position as President of the United States. Ukraine relies heavily on help from the United States, both in terms of armaments, logistics, and intelligence. Air defense, by the way, being a very important part of it. The Europeans can't replace all of that capability, even if they want to. Or even if they, if you put in much more effort, we don't have a lot of that capability available. So what Donald Trump appears to be doing, but we'll see what happens, is pulling the rug from under the Ukrainians who, contrary to what some of your listeners, I think you mentioned just before you started talking to me, are saying, has been subject to a war of aggression. This is not some kind of defensive war by Russia. It's a war of aggression to obtain territory and resources. And that is illegal under international law. And it was adjudged the supreme international crime by the Nuremberg tribunals after the Second World War.
But when you consider, you can think about just about any war of the past 100 years and how it began and what the root causes were, and I include both world wars in this and just about any other conflict. A lot of it comes down to whether the lines drawn on a map take full account of ethnicity. And it's interesting that you can make the case, as some of the callers are, for those who consider themselves to be Russian as to living in Ukraine, and now from Natalia Gumenyuk in Ukraine telling us that if they were to cede land, then that doesn't account of people who consider themselves to be Ukrainian, who would then find themselves living in Russia. Is it ever possible to find a long, peaceful solution to an issue like that? Because the line will always have to be drawn somewhere, Andrew.
I think the question, the premise of the question is false with respect. This isn't about ethnicity. It isn't about persecution. It's about, at best, and that's pretty terrible, imperial ambition. But what it's really about is theft of territory, of resources. It's about power and survival for Putin. There is a sort of mystic Russian nationalism somewhere in all of that, but it doesn't play the main role. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. The other thing is Ukrainians who speak Russian, there are lots of Ukrainians who speak Russian as their first language. Yeah? That doesn't mean that they want to live in Russia. And even if some of them do want to live in Russia, we don't change borders by force. If we do change borders by force, we're into an extremely dangerous situation for Russia itself, by the way, for the whole of Europe, and ultimately, I would say, if President Trump were listening, for the United States of America, because American security depends on European peace. It's not the only thing the American security depends on, but it absolutely is one of the key aspects of American security. You start having war in Europe, war will eventually reach the United States of America, and previous American presidents, however frustrated they've sometimes been with Europe, have always understood that.
Yes, probably what I should have said was that those causes can be used as a just cause for war and potentially an attempt to disguise one's real ambitions. But what remains, and I think what Natalia was saying about it's easy to get caught up on the principle and about Ukraine didn't start it, so why should they give up land? But what concerns Ukrainians are the practicalities that if you give Russia some territory now, not only does it establish a precedent and show a weakness, you felt also it puts them in a stronger position to push further in the future. So is that what we should really be thinking about?
I think this is one of the very important points, that if one is genuinely looking for peace, giving concessions, illegal concessions, but anyway, giving concessions to an aggressor only leads to further potential for war. And by the way, if we're talking a little bit of history here, you talked about previous wars in the last 100 years. Well, let's take 1938 and the Munich Agreement. And the crucial bit about that was that parts of Czechoslovakia were claimed by Hitler, and so claimed by Germany, Hitler on behalf of Germany. Well, the Sudetenland was going to be his last demand. what actually then happened as soon as he was given the Sudetenland? He said, I'm going to invade Czechoslovakia unless the Czechoslovakians surrender. He marched in. The crucial point about that is not even that he invaded Czechoslovakia, but that enabled the invasion of Poland. And that led to ultimately to his ability to wage total war across Europe. Putin is not so different. If he gets Ukraine, it'll enable him to wage war further east. If he gets parts of Ukraine, it'll enable him to wage further west. Excuse me. If he gets parts of Ukraine, it'll enable him to wage war on Ukraine, what's left of Ukraine in the future. So it isn't peace. It's just slightly deferred further war.
And Sudetenland, of course, Hitler had made the case, hadn't he, that it was full of German speakers, those who consider themselves to be ethnically German, and we swallowed that argument that we shouldn't swallow this time.
I agree.
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Andrew, thank you. Andrew Levy, former senior British diplomat who has worked in Moscow. That's his view. What's your